G'day Earthlings, Dr. Rank here, and welcome to Gaming Legends, the show where, like the fleas in your fur, I keep coming back. After unleashing his wrath upon us and failing miserably, Dr. Neo Cortex decided to take a few years vacation in Antarctica. A new threat has risen in his absence, intent on destroying our island home, humiliating and enslaving us, and stealing his brain. A common enemy may unite the oldest of foes, but my relationship with gyroscopic stability can never be reconciled. Can you beat Crash Twinsanity without spinning? The rules are the same as always. We must go from a new save file to the end credits without ever performing a spin attack. If we accidentally spin for any reason, we must either kill ourselves as fast as possible or reload our save file. The run is complete when we win the final battle against the evil twins. Also, there's no bonus challenge this time. I went for max percent spinless in the prior games because gems were earned largely by breaking boxes, and going for them pushes the run's difficulty to its limit. Twinsanity, however, has exactly 0 box gems and is already as hard as it's gonna get. Besides, I'm playing the PAL PS2 version, where the 100% completion reward is completely worthless. Without further ado, let the run begin! The tutorial segment in Jungle Bungle goes by very easily. Despite Cortex's best efforts to convince us otherwise, spinning is completely optional. If we need to kill something, we can either slide, belly flop, or just jump on it. Unfortunately, Aku Aku invincibility has been significantly nerfed in this game. It stops us from taking damage, but it doesn't kill enemies or break boxes anymore. And none of the unlockable superpowers are in this game, so we'll just have to make do with what we have. Our first roadblock comes when we reach Cortex's boss arena. Both Cortex and Mecha Bandicoot require us to play tennis with their plasma shots, and the only valid form of racket is the spin attack. Slides and belly flops do absolutely nothing. And to make matters worse, there's a world crate near this arena, which breaks itself automatically and autosaves your current location to your save file. Once you drop down to this crate, there's no way back up and no way forward without fighting Cortex. If you don't pay attention to where you're going, you could potentially softlock your save file and have to start the run over from the beginning. I highly recommend making frequent backup saves and disabling autosave altogether if you have any doubts. But getting back to our current predicament, how do we get past Cortex? Well, there are 2 important details about Twinsanity that make it unique. 1, it's an open world Crash game, meaning level 1 is connected to level 2, which is connected to level 3, etc. And 2, the colorblind programmer at Traveler's Tales was the lead developer. You could theoretically use an out-of-bounds glitch to go outside the boss arena, steal Cortex's hoverboard, and fly it into the entrance to Cavern Catastrophe, skipping both bosses. Unfortunately, that route is completely unviable. Halfway through the level is this elevator, which can only be activated by the twin spin specifically. Not only is the twin spin itself illegal in this run, but we can only use it after grabbing Cortex, which we can't do unless we spin him. So if we can't cheat, I guess we'll just have to cheat harder. Just to the right of Cavern Catastrophe's exit is a cave leading back to the start of the game. It's technically accessible from both directions, but these pillars won't rise until we finish Cavern Catastrophe. Fortunately, speedrunners have found multiple ways around this, the most common one being nut skip. Grab the acorn from the Wampa Grove, bring it over to this rock, and slide into it to kick it on top. Push it up to the top of the slope, then jump inside right as it reaches the crest. After that, if you jump and mash up and down in just the right way, Crash will teleport over to the cave entrance. I don't fully understand how or why this even works, something about the game copy-pasting coordinates, but I can't complain. After going through the cave and bypassing Cavern Catastrophe, we've got another problem. The first area in Totem Hokum has us escorting Cortex through an obstacle course by removing all the obstacles. You can take care of most of them by jumping, and while you can't slide into this pillar, you can still belly flop it. Unfortunately, this flywheel has a spin-shaped keyhole and the bridge won't open without it. We don't lose lives if Cortex dies, but we do get sent back to the last checkpoint anyway. Now, you could finish this level by climbing up the wall, going out of bounds, and bypassing the cutscene trigger, preventing Cortex from running off in the first place. But why bother when you can just skip the entire level? Back at the beach, we can use this hay bale to get on top of the tree, climb onto the rocks, and get into Farmer Ernest's orchard. The whack-a-mole minigame requires us to grab Cortex, but it's completely optional. If you do a belly flop after a double jump, you can land on the above platform very easily. After the checkpoint is the final roadblock of N-Tranced Island, the boss fight against Tikimon. The only way to damage him is to grab Cortex and use him as a choking hazard, but we can't do that. And once the battle starts, we're locked into the arena until we finish it. So we just have to prevent the battle from starting. If you jump onto and over the rock to the right of the checkpoint, you'll bypass the trigger for the Tikimon Awakens cutscene, letting you calmly walk right past him and board the ferry to the Iceberg lab. The first half of Ice Climb goes by without much trouble, though the enemies can be rather annoying to deal with. You can easily take out the bats with a belly flop, but only if you hit them directly, while the cameras are only affected by the shockwave. Once you reach the top of the cavern, we run into an issue. Cortex is busy trying to dissolve a labor strike, and if we intervene, we grab Cortex automatically during the cutscene with a spinning animation. And if we die after grabbing Cortex, the same spin repeats itself when we respawn. Now, this spin has no sound effect and doesn't occur with a button press, which you guys almost unanimously agreed means that it's perfectly legal. Which is completely irrelevant. It's possible to bypass this cutscene, and thus Cortex, by climbing on top of the cavern doorway, using a belly flop to clip through the ceiling, walking on top of the tunnel, using another belly flop to get on top of the mountain, and jumping around to where the clear gem is. From there, you can reach the switches by using a technique called the long jump. When you perform a slide jump in this game, its momentum gets stored until the next time you jump. If the next jump occurs near the edge of a platform, that momentum gets carried into the regular jump and can be combined with the double jump for greater distance. However, we still need Cortex to break through this window so we can finish the level. Fortunately, a method of getting into and past the Uka Uka boss arena without Cortex has already been documented by YouTube user GPro. Long story short, there's a lot of out-of-bounds shenanigans involved. Sadly, I was unable to reproduce this method completely and got stuck underneath the window. Maybe it's because GPro was using an emulator and the collision loaded differently or something? Or maybe I'm just bad at video games. If anyone manages to pull this off themselves on console, record a video and let me know. I want to see it happen. Either way, that's not the only glitch you could use to proceed. You could also try Mountain Skip. Back at the Iceberg Lab hub area, you can climb on top of the Ice Climb entrance and over the air vents. From there, you can walk along the seam where these two polygons meet. You'll ideally want to keep Crash's right foot inside the mountain at all times. Too far to the left and you'll slide on the slope. Too far to the right and you'll fall off the edge. You'll want to charge up a long jump at some point, then release it when you get to the corner, hopefully landing on the other side of the mountain. Once you get there, you can take the tunnel to the beginning of High Seas Hijinks, skipping past both Ice Climb and Slip Slide Icecapades. High Seas Hijinks itself isn't too bad. There are some moving platforms that require spins to activate, but they can be circumvented with the aforementioned long jump trick. However, the level ends with a mandatory boss fight against Entropy. The last time we fought this guy, he rewarded us with a superpower that turned out to be completely obsolete, and that we had to completely reroute the game to avoid using. To make sure that we properly appreciate his gift, Entropy is now completely immune to everything except the spin attack. And to make matters worse, defeating Entropy is the specific trigger that allows us to enter the Academy of Evil and continue the game. So doing mountain skip is completely pointless.
We require 6 power crystals in order to make the leap, and we have none. Let's see. That isn't enough! All is lost. Unless...
There's one more glitch we can try, but it's not just one glitch. It's the single most complicated, most confusing, and most difficult glitch I've ever had the pleasure of researching, explaining, and executing in my entire YouTube career. Welcome to the Cursed Warp. Alright, let's start from the beginning. Crash Twinsanity doesn't just load the entire world at once. That would take up too much memory. Instead, the game is divided into chunks, which are called upon and dismissed when the player walks in certain locations. When you break a checkpoint crate or world crate, the game stores the crate's checkpoint ID and the chunk ID for Crash's current location, and uses them to determine where Crash will respawn if he dies. But what happens if you break a checkpoint while standing in a different chunk? Well, the game gets confused because it can't find the checkpoint ID in the chunk it's looking for. So instead, it checks all the other chunks that are currently loaded in. And if the correct chunk isn't loaded, then the game is forced to respawn Crash in the last chunk that was loaded at coordinates 00 within that chunk. This is how the Cursed Warp works, and once you activate it, it remains active until you turn the game off or break a new checkpoint. So the question is, how do we activate it? Well, first we need to get into the foyer of Ice Climb without triggering the World Crate, since it's extremely close to the chunk border. Before you start, make sure that your last checkpoint was near the boat in the Iceberg lab, and that you have at least 2 lives. Climb up the mountain as seen before, but this time walk forwards into this white area to fall onto the top of the tunnel. Now you need to walk off and land in this area here as far to the left as possible. Crawl over to where the icicle is and do a belly flop to go through the floor from below. If you messed up and triggered the world crate by accident, just head back to the boat and try again. You'll need at least 1 mask for this next bit, so grab one from nearby if need be. Double jump over the first floating platform and belly flop it so that Crash touches the water without dying. This is important, I swear. Move forward to lure the bat over, then run over to the far wall. Now comes the hard part. You need to start crawling towards the wall and release the crouch button for exactly 1 frame to get into a glitchy state called swag crouching. As soon as you take damage from the bat, mash the jump button and hold down to hopefully land on the platform out of bounds. If you made it this far, climb back up to the tunnel and let the bat follow you. This would normally be the part where speedrunners would spin the bat, sending its corpse into the world crate to break it from a distance. But we don't have that option, and sliding is both inconsistent and pushes us in the opposite direction we want to go. Instead, keep walking along the tunnel, making sure to jump over the section where the ice goes from white to blue. This will not only allow the bat to fly past its established patrol zone, but will also remove the collision where the tunnel goes black, letting you drop back down into it. Lure the bat back over to the white end of the tunnel, get it to about here, and book it to the chunk border. If the stars align, the bat will give up the chase and eventually fly straight into the world crate, breaking it. And that, Earthlings, was just the setup. Now that we've got the Cursed Warp active, we need to actually use it. Remember, the warp takes us to the chunk that was most recently loaded, so we need to die in the right spot. We ultimately want to be in the laboratory interior when we die, for reasons you'll see shortly, but we still need a way up there. The elevator is out of action though, and it won't turn on unless we defeat Uka Uka or complete any subsequent story mission. Which is why we're doing a teleport glitch within a teleport glitch. Remember how we touched the water earlier? That was to set up what's called a splash teleport. Get back on top of the tunnel, but this time drop down to the ledge on the lab side. The exact method will differ between consoles, but for PS2, you just need to jump off the edge and then double jump back on, making sure you land before the animation properly finishes. Then go over to this snow mound, slide off the edge, and keep holding circle while moving the joystick towards the ledge. If you did it right, you'll zip across the map right before Crash dies. Don't ask me how that works because I have no idea. Make sure you pause the game for a few seconds before officially respawning, so the area has time to load properly and the game doesn't crash on you. And guess what? That teleport was both far enough to unload the ice climb chunk where we broke the world crate, and set the last loaded chunk to the laboratory door. And since we had the cursed warp set up, that's exactly where we respawn. Now that we've done one cursed warp, it's time to do another. Head outside the door, climb up the wall onto this plug, and jump through the wall to land on top of the corridor. Walk next to the wall to ensure that the Psychotron chunk loads, then walk along the rest of the corridor until the skybox changes color to indicate that you're actually in the Psychotron chunk. Once this happens, jump off the edge and pause the game for about 7 seconds. When you unpause, you'll realize exactly where the last loaded chunk was.
Come now, as we explore a new dimension! It should have been 2 new dimensions, but we ran out of time.
Yup, that's right. We warped all the way to Twinsanity Island in the 10th dimension, skipping the entirety of Iceberg Lab and the Academy of Evil. This glitch alone delayed this video by an entire week because that's how long it took me to actually do it.
3 years I spent alone in the frozen Antarctic wastes, and I missed you.
Now that we've officially entered the endgame, we can finish Rockslide Rumble with no major issues. Do be warned, however, that once you perform a cursed warp, the game becomes extremely unstable. You can save your progress with a world crate just fine, but if you ever see this loading screen, the game will crash and you'll have to reset the console. Once you do reset it though, everything will be back to normal. Just a bit further ahead is the biggest roadblock of this dimension, Bandicoot Pursuit. In a similar vein to Totem Hokum earlier, Nega Crash is, chasing Cortex through an obstacle course requiring us to escort him. And also like Totem Hokum, these flywheels are impossible to trigger without spinning, inevitably dooming Cortex. Worse still, the trigger for Cortex to start running is the checkpoint crate itself, and there isn't enough time to backtrack to the previous one. Respawning at the checkpoint is a softlock sentence, forcing you to reload your save. There are multiple methods of skipping past this level, but one of them requires us to use Cortex back at the lab, so that's a no-go. Another strategy would be to climb up to this cave, which skips Bandicoot Pursuit entirely, but the last ledge is too high up to jump up to. You can get up there by pushing a nearby Energon Sphere over and using it as a platform, but without spinning, I couldn't push it hard enough to land on the first step. But don't give up yet. If we can't beat the level because Cortex keeps running, we'll just have to stop Cortex from running. Do a slide jump from one platform to the other, allowing you to charge up a long jump. Unleash it while moving diagonally forwards, and you should land on the other side with the checkpoint still intact. Crash's intended path is blocked by a set of saw blades, but Cortex's path is perfectly traversable. I wasn't able to skip the second checkpoint, but this section thankfully doesn't have any flywheels. It does have some close shaves with the flamethrower ants, but we can slide into one and belly flop the other. Do not trigger the third checkpoint though, or you'll have to start the whole thing over again. Instead, long jump around this wall, walk along the rocks to load the chunk properly, and jump around the back wall here. Once you reach the end of the path, you're practically home free. The final level, Ant Agony, doesn't have much to throw at us. The highlights were these mandatory combat sections against the ants. They can be hit with slides, but they can take 2 hits, and that's if you even hit them. The belly flop can take them out instantly, but also leaves you vulnerable. If they're bunched together in too large a group, use slides to take out the outermost ants, then use belly flops once they're down to 2 or 3. The Energon Sphere puzzles also get slightly more complicated. Spinning one pushes it forwards at a low angle, while sliding tosses it more vertically. This becomes a minor issue with this section where you're supposed to take out the nitros with an explosive sphere. If we slide into the sphere, it will explode as soon as it lands, making it much harder to clear the path. Thankfully, the solution isn't any more complicated than just changing where we slide from. Walk down the longest, emptiest hallway in the multiverse to face the final bosses, Victor and Moritz. Each phase of this boss has you using a different character to fight the evil twins Deathbot, with the first phase using Cortex's niece, Nina Cortex. Nina has her own spin attack that's just as illegal as Crash's, but she can also punch with the circle button. And this punch is fully capable of destroying the energy cells, letting us deal damage to the Deathbot completely spinless. The other two phases pass the torch to Cortex and Mecha Bandicoot, and while we do still have to use the spin button for their attacks, those attacks are distinctly not spins. With the evil twins' playtime thoroughly concluded and Nega Crash enjoying a delicious chicken dinner, the Crash Twinsanity spinless run is officially conquered. This was, without question, the single hardest spinless run I've ever partaken in. And that's despite Crash 1 and 2 being literally impossible. It's basically a speed run without the speed, and unless you already have that skill, I see absolutely no reason to try it for yourself. Speaking of speedruns, shout out to the current any percent and 100% world record holders Noah Simcox and Joester98, whose runs I used as reference. And special thanks to everyone in the Crash Bandicoot speedrunning Discord for helping me learn how to do cursed warps. You guys were insanely supportive, and I can't thank you enough. If you want to watch the full run, you can check out the uncommentated footage in the description. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next challenge run. Don't worry, I'll get to Crash 4 eventually, and I will see you down under.